The tires crackled against gravel as the car rolled to a stop at the end of a long dirt driveway, swallowed by thick pines on either side. The cabin stood at the clearing center, tall and quiet, its dark wooden frame looming like an old sentinel. Tatiana pressed her forehead to the window, staring at it. A smile tugged her lips, though she felt the faintest flutter of unease. "It looks older than the pictures," she said softly. Rossif chuckled, throwing the car into park. "That's the charm. Rustic. Off the grid. No distractions, no neighbors, no cell service, just us." He reached over, brushing his thumb across her hand. His touch was warm, familiar, grounding. They'd been married 7 years, but lately, something had shifted between them. Distance, like a thin sheet of ice forming over water. This trip, he promised, would melt it. The moment she stepped outside, Tatiana inhaled the crisp pine air. It carried a dampness, a faint scent of moss and something older. Earth that had been undisturbed too long. The cabin's front door groaned as Rossif pushed it open. Inside, shadows clung stubbornly to the corners, even with daylight spilling across the wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of iron, of wood smoke long gone. A mounted deer head watched from above the fireplace, its glassy eyes catching the light in a way that made Tatiana shiver. Rossif pulled her into his arms, his voice low against her ear. "Happy anniversary, Tati. 7 years. You're still the most beautiful thing in my life." She smiled, but part of her wanted to glance back at the deer head, as if it were still staring. They unpacked slowly, laughing about the lack of modern amenities, no TV, no Wi-Fi, not even reliable plumbing. Rossif lit a fire, the flames licking against the darkened stone. The shadows danced and stretched. For the first time in months, Tatiana felt the warmth of closeness again, like they were rediscovering something that had been slipping. That night, they shared a bottle of wine. Rossif kissed her across the rim of his glass, his smile soft, his eyes tender. They curled up together by the fire until Tatiana drifted into a hazy sleep against his chest. But sometime deep into the night, she stirred. The fire had gone out. The cabin was drenched in shadow. Her husband wasn't beside her. "Rossif," she whispered. No answer. The wind pressed against the windows, carrying with it a sound that was almost like breathing. Tatiana's throat tightened. She called again, louder. "Rossif?" Then came the creak of the floorboards. Not near her, but at the far end of the cabin. She held her breath. The darkness there seemed thicker, wrong. Tatiana stood, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. She padded quietly toward the noise, her hand brushing against the wall for balance. "Rossif, are you trying to scare me?" Her voice quivered, betraying her. From the hallway, a soft whisper rose. Not words. Something thinner, stretched, like breath slipping through teeth. Her skin prickled. Tatiana froze. The whisper grew sharper, then stopped. Just as suddenly, the floor creaked again, closer now. She swallowed hard and reached for the lamp on the table. Her fingers brushed the switch. The bulb flickered once, then went dark again, leaving her in suffocating black. Her heart hammered in her chest. And then, just before the silence became unbearable, the front door opened with a heavy groan. Rossif's voice carried in, casual, almost cheerful. "Sorry, Tati, I had to run out for something." Tatiana stood trembling in the middle of the room, staring into the darkness where she had heard the whispers. Something had been there. She knew it. And it wasn't Rossif. Tatiana sat stiff on the couch, her hands knotted in her lap, as Rossif dropped a small brown paper bag onto the counter. He was smiling, too easily, too casually, like nothing strange had happened. "You went out?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "Yeah," he said, unpacking. "There's a little convenience shack a few miles down the road. Thought I'd surprise you." Got coffee, some snacks, even matches in case the lighter gives out. Tatiana's pulse thudded in her ears. She glanced at the paper bag, then back to him. You just left. In the middle of the night. Rossif paused, his brows knitting. You were asleep. I didn't want to wake you. Tati, what's wrong? The cabin's silence seemed to press in, suffocating. She wanted to scream that while he was gone, something had been inside with her. That she had heard whispers. That the air itself had shifted, as though the place had exhaled. But his eyes were calm, searching hers with the concern of a husband, not the guilt of someone hiding something. She forced a small smile. Nothing. Just startled when I woke up alone. He kissed her forehead, lingering. You're safe. I wouldn't let anything happen to you. But as he turned away, the words clung to her uneasily. Wouldn't let anything happen, but something already had. The next day was painted in soft grays, mist lingering low over the pines. Rossif insisted on making breakfast, humming off-key as eggs sizzled in the pan. Tatiana moved to the window, pressing her hand against the cold glass. The trees looked endless, their trunks lined like teeth, their branches clawing at the pale sky. For a moment, she thought she saw something moving among them. A shape darker than the shadows, sliding from one tree to the next. Her breath fogged the glass. Rossif, she called softly. Come look. By the time he joined her, it was gone. He squinted. See what? She shook her head. Nothing. Just the mist. He kissed her cheek. You're too wound up. This place is good for us. You'll see. Tatiana tried to believe him. She tried to settle into the rhythm of the day, reading by the fire, playing cards, sipping coffee. But the unease never left. The cabin was too quiet, the wood groaning with each shift in temperature, as if remembering old injuries. That night, after Rossif fell asleep, Tatiana lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silence was so deep it had weight. And then, like before, it shifted. A faint scratching came from the walls. Not steady, but erratic, as if nails dragged slowly across wood. Her skin crawled. She turned her head toward the sound, her breath shallow. Rossif, she whispered. He didn't stir. The scratching grew louder, closer. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Tatiana forced herself up, her feet touching the cold floor. The room was cloaked in shadow, the fire nothing but embers. She stepped toward the far wall, straining to listen. And then she saw it. Carved into the wooden beam beside the window was a word, rough and deep, as if gouged with something sharp. She leaned closer, her stomach twisting. Keeper. Her breath caught. She stumbled back, her pulse racing. Behind her, the bed springs creaked. She turned sharply. Rossif was still sleeping soundly. But the carved word remained, stark and jagged in the firelight. The cabin had whispered its name. And now, it would not let her forget. Tatiana didn't sleep. She lay stiff on the edge of the bed, eyes wide, the carved word burning into her thoughts like a brand. Keeper. It wasn't just a name, it felt like a claim. By morning, Rossif was already up, whistling as though the night hadn't happened at all. He handed her a mug of steaming coffee, his smile too bright. You look like you didn't close your eyes, he said. I didn't, she admitted. Rossif chuckled lightly. That's what I get for bringing you out to the middle of nowhere. You're too used to the city noise. She wanted to tell him, about the scratching, the word carved deep into the wood, but something stopped her. A voice in the back of her head whispered that he wouldn't believe her, that he'd laugh it off the same way he was laughing now. And worse, she didn't want to hear him dismiss what she knew was real. Instead, she sipped the coffee and said nothing. By afternoon, Rossif decided they should take a walk into the forest trails. Fresh air, exercise. It'll settle you, he said, his hand slipping into hers. The trees closed around them as they walked, tall pines knitting the sky into patches. The deeper they went, the more Tatiana felt watched. She kept glancing back, certain she would see someone behind them, but the path stretched empty. Rossif was humming again, distracted, as though the trip wasn't about reconnecting with her at all but escaping into his own thoughts. When they reached a clearing, Tatiana froze. Across a tree trunk, carved in the same jagged strokes as the cabin beam, was another word. Keeper. Her stomach twisted. Rossif, she whispered, pointing. He followed her gaze. For a moment, his expression flickered, something unreadable, a shadow crossing his face. Then he shrugged. Probably kids. You know, messing around before we got here. Tatiana stared at him. But it's the same. Exactly the same. Rossif took her shoulders gently. Tati, listen. This place, it's old. People carve things all the time. You're letting your imagination run wild. But his eyes didn't quite meet hers when he said it. That night, Tatiana couldn't sit still. She paced the cabin, every creak and sigh of the wood pulling her head sharply around. She found herself drawn back to the carved beam, tracing the rough grooves with her fingertips. The word felt alive beneath her skin. Behind her, something shifted. A soft sound, like fabric brushing against the floor. Her breath hitched. Slowly, she turned. In the far corner, just beyond the glow of the fire, the shadows seemed too thick. They rippled. Moved. Rossif, she whispered. No answer. She stepped closer, heart pounding so loudly she thought it might shatter her ribs. The dark seemed to pulse. For a split second, she thought she saw the shape of a figure, tall, gaunt, its head bent at an unnatural angle. Watching her. Her throat closed. She staggered back, slamming into the table. The lamp rattled. Tatiana. Rossif's voice called from the bedroom. She spun toward the sound, then looked back to the corner. Empty. Just wood and shadow. Rossif appeared, groggy, rubbing his eyes. What happened? Tatiana swallowed hard, shaking her head. Nothing. I thought I saw. But the words died in her throat. She knew if she said it aloud, it would become real. Rossif studied her with a strange calm. Too calm. Then he placed a hand on her shoulder. You're safe. Remember? I'm here. Nothing's going to hurt you. His touch was steady, but his eyes lingered too long on hers, almost searching. Almost, waiting. Tatiana nodded, though every nerve in her body screamed that she was being lied to. Later, when she returned to the carved beam, she found something new. Not just keeper. Underneath it, freshly gouged, were two more words. You belong. Tatiana woke to the sound of breathing. Not Rossif's, the steady rise and fall she had memorized over 7 years of marriage, but something heavier. Ragged. Wet. As though lungs filled with fluid were dragging for air. Her eyes snapped open. The room was soaked in darkness, the fire long gone cold. A pale wash of moonlight cut through the curtain, just enough to paint the edges of the bed. Rossif lay beside her, his face turned away, chest rising and falling in deep sleep. But the breathing wasn't coming from him. It came from the corner. Tatiana's heart jolted. She strained her eyes toward the far side of the room. At first, there was nothing. Only shadow. Then it moved. A figure leaned out of the darkness, taller than any man she'd ever seen, its limbs thin as branches, its head bowed low. What little moonlight touched it revealed skin stretched too tight, waxen and gray. Its jaw hung slack, and from the black of its mouth came the sickening, rattling breath. Tatiana couldn't move. Every muscle locked. The thing bent lower, its long fingers grazing the floorboards as if testing the wood. Slowly, its head tilted up. Eyes. Hollow pits. Yet she felt them lock on her. Her breath hitched, and the sound seemed to rattle through the room like a stone dropped into still water. The figure twitched. Then it stepped forward. Tatiana bolted upright, clutching Rossif's arm. Rossif. Rossif, wake up. He stirred, groaning. By the time his eyes blinked open, the figure was gone. The corner was empty. What is it? He muttered. She clung to him, trembling. It was here. In the room. Watching me. Rossif's jaw tightened, but he pulled her against his chest. Shoo. You had a nightmare, that's all. No. Her voice cracked. I saw it. It was real. His arms tightened around her, almost too much. Tati, listen to me. It can't hurt you if you don't let it. Do you understand? She pulled back, staring at him. The words were wrong. Too precise. Not comfort, but instruction. Rossif looked at her with eyes that seemed older, heavier than they had ever been. You'll be fine. As long as you remember that. The next day, Tatiana couldn't shake the feeling that Rossif knew more than he admitted. He was quiet, moving through the cabin with a strange ease, as though he belonged here. As though the cabin were his and not some rental he'd booked online. Tatiana searched the rooms, desperate for answers. In a drawer in the bedroom, she found an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting inside was jagged, frantic. The keeper is bound to this place. It takes what is left behind. It takes who it chooses. Once it marks you, you are not yours anymore. Her stomach dropped. The words clawed at her. Suddenly, the sound of wood splitting echoed from the main room. Tatiana flinched, clutching the journal. She ran out. And froze. The word keeper was gouged again into the front door, deeper this time, so deep the wood splintered. But this time, beneath it, letters stretched in dripping black, as though scrawled in some thick, tar-like fluid. You are mine. Her throat closed. The smell hit next, sweet and metallic, like rotting fruit and blood. Rossif stepped out of the kitchen calmly, wiping his hands on a cloth. What's wrong? Tatiana pointed at the door, her hands shaking. Don't you see it? Don't you smell it? He looked. Paused. Then turned back to her with a chilling softness. It doesn't matter, Tatiana. Fighting it only makes it worse. Her pulse thundered. You know what this is. Don't you? You knew before we came here. Rossif didn't answer. His silence was worse than denial. That night, when Tatiana lay in bed trembling, the whispers returned. Only this time, they weren't thin and distant. They were right at her ear, curling inside her skull like smoke. Keeper keeps. Keeper takes. Keeper claims. The last word struck like a knife. You. The storm came at dusk. Wind screamed through the trees, hurling needles of rain against the cabin windows. The fire sputtered in the hearth, its light too small, too weak against the swelling dark. Tatiana paced, trembling. The journal lay open on the table, its pages warped from age. She reread the same line again and again, her lips moving silently. Once it marks you, you are not yours anymore. Rossif sat across from her, calm, his eyes following her every move. You're scaring yourself with that thing, he said softly. Burn it. Stop feeding it. Tatiana snapped her head toward him. You knew. You brought me here. Didn't you? His face didn't change. He just folded his hands. You needed to see. To understand. The words chilled her more than the storm. What does that mean? Rossif's voice was steady, too steady. It chooses. It always has. And once it chooses, there's no undoing it. Tatiana's chest tightened. You're talking like this has happened before. His silence was the answer. The cabin groaned under the weight of the storm. Tatiana pressed her palms to her face, fighting the rising scream in her throat. When she lowered her hands, she froze. The shadows in the corners of the room were moving. Sliding. Stretching. Rossif, she whispered. He didn't flinch. He only said, don't run. The shadows thickened into form. A figure emerged, tall, skeletal, its limbs impossibly long. The keeper. Its head scraped the beams of the ceiling, jaw slack, black eyes fixed on her. Tatiana stumbled back, her shoulder slamming into the table. The journal fell to the floor, its pages fluttering like frantic wings. The keeper moved closer, its movements jerking, unnatural, like a marionette on tangled strings. The stench hit her again, iron, decay, damp earth. Rossif didn't move. He only whispered, almost reverently, it's here. Help me. Tatiana screamed, tears streaking her cheeks. But Rossif only shook his head. I can't. It isn't me it wants. The keeper's hand extended, fingers too long, ending in blackened claws. They reached for her face. She backed against the wall, heart pounding so loud she thought the cabin itself would hear. The clawed fingers brushed her skin. Cold, so cold it burned. A searing mark spread across her cheek like frostbite. Tatiana shrieked, clawing at her face, but the mark didn't fade. It sank into her, glowing faintly in the dark, as though the thing had branded her from within. The keeper bent low, its face inches from hers. Its breath was rancid, filling her lungs, suffocating her. Its voice rasped, not spoken but injected into her head. You belong. Tatiana screamed, shoving herself past Rossif, sprinting for the door. She tore it open, the storm lashing at her skin. She stumbled into the rain, mud sucking at her feet. But when she looked back, her stomach dropped. Rossif was still inside, standing before the keeper as if before a priest. His lips moved soundlessly, whispering. And the keeper wasn't attacking him. It bowed its head. Tatiana ran into the woods, branches clawing at her arms, rain blinding her eyes. Her lungs burned, her legs trembled. But no matter how far she ran, the forest stretched on endlessly, the trees repeating themselves like a looping nightmare. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, mud caked on her skin. Behind her, the storm quieted. The wind dropped. A silence fell, thick and absolute. Then, from the shadows of the trees, dozens of hollow eyes opened. Figures stood among the pines, gaunt, twisted things with slack jaws and rotting skin. Not alive. Not dead. The keeper's children. And in the distance, she heard Rossif's voice, calm, steady, almost tender. Don't fight it, Tati. This is what it was always meant to be. Tatiana's lungs burned as she stumbled through the forest, mud and pine needles sticking to her skin. The hollow-eyed figures didn't chase her, but their presence was worse. They simply stood, unmoving, like a silent congregation waiting for a sermon. Their eyes followed her every step, empty and endless. She pressed her back against a tree, sobbing. The storm had thinned into a drizzle, yet the woods dripped and whispered as if alive. She could still hear Rossif's voice carrying through the rain, low and steady, like prayer. Something inside her broke. She turned and bolted back toward the cabin. If she was going to die, she wanted answers first. The door stood open, the fire within flickering unnaturally bright, casting long, spidery shadows across the floor. Rossif stood by the hearth, his face calm, his clothes soaked. He didn't even look surprised to see her return. I told you not to run, he said softly, almost like a father scolding a frightened child. Tatiana's teeth chattered as she stepped inside. What did you do, Rossif? What is this place? He sighed, rubbing his wet hair back from his forehead. For the first time in years, he looked tired, bone-deep, anciently tired. It isn't the place, Tati, he said. It's him. The keeper. He's always been here. Since long before us. Since long before anyone. Her stomach twisted. And you brought me here knowing this? Rossif's eyes softened with something like pity. It had to be you. I can't explain it. He chose. And once he chooses, there's no way out. Tatiana shook her head violently, tears spilling. No. You're lying. You're sacrificing me. He stepped closer, reaching for her hands. She yanked them away, but his voice didn't rise. It stayed calm, steady. Do you think I wanted this? He whispered. Do you think I haven't fought it? My grandfather fought it. My father fought it. But it always comes back. One way or another, the keeper takes what he claims. And now, it's you. Tatiana's knees went weak. She staggered back, colliding with the table. The journal still lay there, its pages crumpled from the storm wind. She snatched it, flipping through desperately, until her eyes caught a passage she hadn't seen before. The keeper does not feed on flesh but on bond. It takes the one most loved. The one offered freely or stolen, it does not matter. Love is the tether. The sacrifice must be given by the hand that holds it closest. Her blood turned to ice. Slowly, she raised her eyes to Rossif. You brought me here because you love me. He didn't deny it. Her chest heaved. You're giving me away. His face broke then, his eyes filling with tears, his voice cracking. I don't want to. But if I don't, he takes everything. He takes me. He takes us both. Tatiana shook her head, stepping back toward the door. But before she reached it, the air shifted. Heavy. Thick. The fire roared, though no wood had been added. And from the shadows of the cabin, he emerged. The keeper. Taller now, towering, his bones cracking as he unfurled himself from the dark. His hollow eyes fixed on her, black as pits. His fingers dragged against the floor, leaving gouges in the wood. Tatiana froze. The mark on her cheek burned, glowing faintly. Rossif dropped to his knees before the creature, sobbing. Please, please spare her pain. Please, let it be quick. The keeper's head tilted. Its mouth opened in a soundless scream, and then, in Tatiana's head, the words came again, sharp, invasive. No mercy. She is mine. Tatiana screamed, clutching her head. The journal fell from her hands. The fire flared higher, shadows stretching like grasping arms. And in that moment, she understood. There was no escape. No bargaining. Rossif hadn't brought her here to save their marriage. He had brought her here to feed it. To feed him. The fire exploded upward, its light filling the cabin with a grotesque orange glow. Shadows leapt like wild animals across the walls, writhing, clawing. Tatiana staggered back against the doorframe, her breath breaking in sharp sobs. The keeper towered above her, its head bending unnaturally low to fit beneath the ceiling. Its hollow eyes pinned her like a moth beneath glass. The mark on her cheek throbbed hot, spreading like veins of fire through her skin. Rossif was still on his knees, his face wet with tears, his hands folded as though in prayer. Please, he whispered hoarsely, please take her and spare me. Spare us. Tatiana stared at him, disbelief ripping through her chest. Spare us, she choked. You coward, you gave me to it. Rossif's eyes were raw, broken. It's the only way, Tati. If I don't give you, it takes me. It takes us both. You don't understand, it always takes. The keeper's breath rattled the air, heavy and foul. Its mouth opened wide, too wide, stretching down its chest, a pit of darkness lined with needle teeth. Tatiana's scream tore from her throat as she lunged for the journal on the floor. She flipped frantically through the pages, though her vision blurred from tears. Words jumped at her: bond, offering, love. She realized the truth too late. The keeper fed not just on bodies, but on what tethered them. Rossif's love had delivered her here, chained her to this fate. The air thickened, pressing on her lungs. The figures from the forest appeared in the doorway, gaunt, rotting, silent. The keeper's congregation. Their jaws hung open, slack, as though waiting to sing. The creature lowered its face to hers, the stench of its breath filling her skull. The words came again, thunder in her head. Keeper keeps. Keeper takes. Keeper claims. You. The mark on her cheek split open like a wound. Black veins spread across her skin, crawling down her neck, her arms. Her body shook violently. No. She screamed, clawing at her flesh. You won't have me. For a moment, it stopped. The fire hissed, the congregation wavered. And then Rossif's voice cut through, trembling, broken. Yes, keeper. Take her. She's yours. Tatiana's world shattered. Her husband's words sealed her. The veins surged, crawling deeper, sinking into her bones. Her scream was swallowed as her jaw locked open, her throat filling with something thick, black, and alive. She stumbled toward Rossif, her eyes burning with fury. For an instant, she wanted to beg, to plead, to ask why. But what came out was not her voice. It was the keeper's. Bound. Claimed. Mine. Rossif collapsed to the floor, sobbing into his hands. Tatiana's body convulsed, her skin splitting, peeling away in strips. Beneath, something darker pushed free. Her arms lengthened, fingers stretching into claws. Her eyes hollowed, black and endless. The keeper bent back, vanishing into shadow as though melting into her form. The fire extinguished, plunging the cabin into silence and dark. And when the silence lifted, she stood alone, no longer Tatiana, no longer wife. She was the keeper now. When the storm cleared, the woods were silent once more. The cabin stood waiting. And Rossif, his face gaunt, his mind broken, sat in the corner rocking slowly, whispering over and over into the emptiness. She was mine. She was mine. She was mine. But the shadows whispered back, in a voice that was no longer hers. No. She is mine.